All right, guys, welcome back to Everything College Football Podcast. Today I'll be doing my preview and prediction for first-round CFP game between Ohio State and Tennessee. 7.5-point line in favor of the Buckeyes. 47.5 is the total. 8 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC from Ohio Stadium in Columbus. Getting things started with the traveling offense. Tennessee brings Nico Lamaliva at quarterback into this contest. Having a good year, 19 touchdowns, only 5 picks, over 2,500 yards. Throughout the year, though, it's not been easy for him. And a lot of these numbers have really been ran up against weaker opponents for the most part in conference. They played tough defenses, and he wasn't all that great. The game against Bama wasn't very pretty. Had one great throw against Oklahoma. The game against Arkansas was abysmal. I thought he played an all right game against Georgia, but the stat sheet, of course, would stay otherwise. Only 60% for 167. And then against Vanderbilt, though, to close out the year, after a slow start, ended up with 257 and 4 touchdowns. That's a pretty good defense right there. But for the most part, this is a Tennessee offense that's just really struggled with camaraderie in this passing attack. They love to spread you out. They like to take shots across the middle of the field, deep downfield as well. It's a complex offense for sure, and against Vandy, you saw glimpses of them being able to play at a high level, but it's just not been pretty for him, and it's not probably going to be all that great on the road here against the toughest defense they've seen all year. It's going to be loud here. This is a team that's going to be looking for redemption after a tough loss. I think Nico, he can certainly rise up in these big moments, though, showcase how great of a talent he is. 6'6", 215, has 311 and a rushing touchdown this year. This is a guy who has tremendous arm talent as well. I think at any moment he could probably just turn into a complete monster for opposing defenses. You haven't seen it right now. You haven't seen it so far. I think it'd be hard to expect in a CFP game, but that's the type of talent he brings to the table. I would feel confident having him at QB going into a road contest like this with a national title potentially at stake. You look at the weapons here. Dante Thornton, he's been hit or miss this year. 25 receptions, 647 yards, though, and 6 TDs. He goes quiet very often, but he has 3 games of 100-plus yards this year. Each of those came on only 3 receptions, and he also had at least a touchdown in those games. So this is a guy who's a big play weapon. 26 yards per catch is a phenomenal number. Leads the team in touchdowns. You want to see him be more, consistent in his production, but at the same time, if that's all you're going to do is make big plays, that's totally fine because he's going to be your deep option downfield. Brew McCoy, more of your possession pass catcher, great hands at the sticks. Squirrel White, Chris Brazel, Miles Kinsman at tight end. These guys each have 296-plus yards on the year. And Kinsman at tight end, 4 touchdowns. That's pretty much it. Those are going to be your guys. It's not the deepest of wide receiver rooms, but they have 4 capable players here that can make plays for them at pass catcher. It's not been great in terms of consistency from these weapons, but this is a group, I think, with the limitations at quarterback in terms of, the progression not being as great as you would envision. They're having a good year. You don't see too many drops from these guys. They've been pretty sure-handed for the most part. Good targeted percentages in terms of catching the football. So this is a reliable receiving group, I would say, for the most part. You move to a rushing attack. It's led by the dynamic Dylan Sampson, 1,485 yards, 22 touchdowns. This guy's been, a goal line merchant, but he's also the heart and soul of this football team. Had a pretty good game against Georgia, 101 yards rushing on 19 touches against Bama. It took him a while to get going, but he did have 26 for 139 and 2 scores. Started grinding them down as the game went on. Those probably going to be your best comparable defenses. He had 3 scores against Florida as well. It's a pretty good run-stopping unit as well. And then 178 in the finale against Vanderbilt. This is a guy who's probably going to get his own. Going up against a very tough run defense. As the game went on, though, they started giving up some plays to Khalil Mullings. I think he ended up with over 100 yards in that game. And Sampson's a workhorse. 21 attempts per contest. In the SEC play, he really gets the rock a ton. 25 attempts per game in conference play. This is pretty much a conference game in terms of caliber of opponent. So he's going to be a workhorse. I think he'll probably eventually end up hitting his 100 yards. Can he find those explosive plays, though? Will he be successful against what is an elite red zone defense? Those are going to be your biggest questions there. I think for the most part, this is a team that's running the ball very well this year, 232 yards per game. They've done well against tougher opponents. Haven't exactly taken games over. Other than that fourth quarter against Bama, I thought they really took over, really in the whole second half. And against Georgia, they were stable and consistent. Didn't really take that game over either, though. Explosive plays are going to be the thing to watch. And of course, an offensive line is a big reason for that. I think on the interior, these are going to be your best run blockers. Anjar Karik, he's been really good at left guard. Center, Cooper Mays, that's going to be your veteran leader. Right guard, Javonte Spraggins, he's been much better in pass pro than as a run blocker. You look at left tackle, this is your biggest weakness. Lance Hurd, a former 5-star, transfers in. It's been a tough year for him, especially as a run blocker. Hasn't been phenomenal as a pass blocker either. And then John Campbell on the other side at right tackle has also been less than stellar. Him and Dane Davis, been kind of swapping that position out. Davis had a pretty good game against Vanderbilt. We'll see who ends up getting a bulk of the reps. I think they're probably just going to keep doing that thing where they're rotating them in and out. They both had 30-plus snaps in that game and ride with the hot hand. But right tackle has not exactly been, a polished position for them. It's been their worst one in terms of, sacks and pressures allowed. This is a good offensive line, though. I like their ability, to perform in this scheme where, there is a lot of explosive plays to be had. There's a lot of hurry up, and offense likes to move fast, and of course, great conditioning. They have some toughness to them as well. So the offensive line this year has played considerably well, but against this pass rush, it'll be remaining to see how good they can be. Final thoughts overall is I think Nico, I would trust him in this situation, but, throughout the year, it's not been great for him to go on the road and try to put on a clinic against Ohio State, and that's what they're probably going to need. They're also going to have to run the ball well, so typical Tennessee, you're going to have to find that balance. They found it against Vanderbilt, different animal here. They're going to have to be stout in all regards, be efficient, don't turn over the ball. And I moved to an Ohio State offense. Last time we seen these guys, lost for the 4th time in a row to Michigan, put up only 252 yards and 10 points. We made a 20-minute video talking about Ryan Day and our thoughts on that contest, so we'll kind of leave those over there. The biggest talking point, though, is that, Ryan Day just does not have these guys in the right mental state, and I think that's quite clear for when they play the Wolverines. They don't believe they can beat those guys. They don't, really rise up in big moments anymore. I think they play well in big games, but they just don't win them anymore, it seems. And then that 1-point loss to Oregon kind of solidifies that. Last time they lost to Michigan at home, they went on to play Georgia, and they put on a clinic in the semifinal playoff game. Still ended up losing that game, though, despite them looking so good on offense. And they just have a mental hurdle to clear. Ryan Day has a couple of weeks to get them in the right state. It's embarrassing losing to Michigan, yes, but you still have a national championship potentially in front of you. And I think Will Howard's going to start with him. And, the offensive line, we'll get to them, and they've been abysmal for sure, especially with all the injuries. But, he made some mistakes of his own. This is a guy who's played good all year long. First 2-interception game of the year. Only had 175 yards passing, 19 of 33 throwing the ball. They didn't have it very much in the second half. And when they did, they just couldn't capitalize on the opportunities. Had a bad interception in the red zone. Had another bad interception returned for 6. So Will Howard, he's put that behind him, and I think he certainly will. This is a guy who's been very accurate this year, over 72%, has thrown some phenomenal footballs, is a good runner, 7 rushing touchdowns. He's very live at the goal line. I like his speed for being 235 pounds. This is a good veteran quarterback who's got to be able to put this behind him, lead this football team. I think that's something he can certainly do with all this time passing by. Has 2 great receivers, Jeremiah Smith, the true freshman's been sensational this year. 934 and 10 touchdowns. This is a guy who started off the year hot. It's been a little bit quieter as the year has went on. 35 yards against Michigan, 34 against Indiana, and what was a blowout. Had a drop touchdown against Penn State. So the back half of the year hasn't been great, but this is a guy who can take over games, and I think they're going to make it a focal point just to toss the rock. That's one thing that we kept seeing them try to do is run the ball. They need to go out there and just let this thing loose, put 4 wideouts out there, throw it to the open guy. Even if they're not open, this quarterback can put it on you. They can make Agbuka in the slot, 60 grabs for 743 and 9 touchdowns. He's the veteran in this young receiving group. Carnell Tate, he's really emerged the past couple of weeks. 6 grabs for 58 yards against Michigan. Had a career-high 2 TDs against Northwestern a couple weeks before that. This is a guy who's had 4+ receptions in each of the last 4 games, and he had 100+ in the tie game against Nebraska. So this is a very good receiver, really starting to emerge. He's another one of those high-end recruits. Brandon Innes, only 12 receptions, but he's a talented player who will get on the field. I think G. Scott's a pretty good tight end, makes some big plays for them on occasion. This is a passing attack, again, that I think can really elevate in big moments. They have to believe in themselves, though. Got to put that mental hurdle behind them. The play caller and Chip Kelly's got to be behind them. They need to throw the rock more. You've seen them have success in spurts when they decided to do that. Just could not fully execute because you also had 2 missed field goals. There were really chip shots for Felding. So, again, the mental hurdle needs to be clear going into this game. They got to put that behind them. You got to believe that you're the best because I think when they're operating at a high rate, like the rate that we're accustomed to them seeing, they're going to be tough to beat. That's the biggest concern with the passing attack. The offensive line, coming into the year, I thought that this was going to be an issue for Ohio State. I thought it was the least impressive group on the roster, and now the injuries have taken full shape with Josh Simmons, a left tackle, being down for a good bit, and Seth McLaughlin going out, a couple of games ago for the year. They've had to do a lot of reshuffling, and it's not been pretty. Donovan Jackson moving over the left tackle, not his position at all. He's the best player on this O-line. Over here at left tackle, He's had some struggles, didn't look good against Michigan, battle-tested against Penn State. Austin Severlid wasn't all that good against Michigan either. Carson Hinsman was atrocious. Right guard Tegra Tajabola has not been good all year, and Josh Fryer really hasn't been good either. He's been, pretty inconsistent at his right tackle spot. This offensive line is just not good. And people, for some reason, want to argue with that. Maybe they're just soft. They're not that talented. They're not that deep. And now their two best players are down. This unit has taken a significant step backwards. It's not great for them at all. You go up against another great defensive line in Tennessee. Michigan, everyone knows they have a phenomenal front four, and they were eating all game long in pass protection. Couldn't run the ball, and they kept trying to for some reason. 26 carries for only 77 yards. That's not great. You certainly want to get better play out of these guys. You might have to keep your backs in the block, which you don't want to do that because these two guys are great playmakers. But in a matchup like this, you're gonna have to bring in extra tight ends, chip block, get the ball out quickly. You have pass catchers who are dangerous in space, so I think that's gonna be the game plan to try and slow down this defense. The Tennessee D-line, they also played a bit of a hobbled Georgia O-line a couple weeks back, and they got held in check and allowed Beck to just absolutely tear them apart. So try to take a page out of that playbook, but the offensive line overall just has to be better. You can scheme it up all you want, but against this type of force, they're going to have to be blocking at a higher rate. Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson, of course, both have 750-plus yards, 12 touchdowns combined. These guys are incredibly fresh. Only about 10 touches per game between the two, each, that is. So they're incredibly fresh coming into a matchup like this. You're certainly going to ride the hot hand at this position. You want to be able to run the ball well. That's how this offense wants to operate. But if it's not, they need to just let this rock air it out. Because it's been at times this year where they've really struggled to run the ball. Last time they had 200 yards in a game was back on the 5th of October. They've been playing some pretty weak opponents. They've been efficient in contests like Indiana. The Penn State game, they were efficient. Purdue, whatever, and they didn't hit that mark. They probably could have, but it's still something that's noted here. So Ohio State's offense got to be better up front, got to block against a great defensive line, and Will Howard has got to be the leader here, put the mental failure behind them. We now move to a Tennessee defense, alluding to that great D-line. It's been more quiet here down the stretch, but this is a team that can, turn it on at any moment up front. Of course, it starts with a phenomenal edge rusher in James Pierce. This guy likely to go, top 15 in the draft. He's a phenomenal edge rusher for them. Good run defender this year. He's really taken a step in that regard of his game. Dominic Bailey, Bryson Eason, and then, of course, Joshua Josephs on the other side. They're pretty deep here. Omari Thomas, Omar Norman Lott, veterans on the interior. And Tyree West is also having a heck of a season. This is a pass rush. This is lethal. They're deep. 7.5 sacks for Pierce. Norman Lott has 4, 29 as a team. They probably should have higher numbers, but they don't. They had 0 sacks against Georgia. They're able to come away with 3 against Vanderbilt. They're just not creating as many negative plays as we were seeing early on in the year, where they were just annihilating opponents. Only 2 tackles were lost against Georgia, only 5 in total against Vandy. They're able to tee off on UTEP, whatever. But for the most part, in the month of November, this D-line didn't have the greatest of efforts against Mississippi State. They were able to create some nice negative plays. This is still a run defense, though. It is incredibly polished. And, I looked at some of those games that they didn't look stout in. 168 for Kentucky. 180 rushing for Miss State. Georgia, they only had 100+, but they showcased some nice plays at moments. Early on in the year, they were flat out dominating opponents, just holding them in check. 2 yards or less per carry in a lot of games they played this year. Only about 100 yards per contest on the year allowed for Tennessee. This is a really stout defensive line. You think this is a great matchup for them to potentially be able to step up in with a couple of weeks off Ohio State. They're going to be much better up front. I would assume so. This pass rush can really turn this game around. And if they can, defenses travel. If they can really, put Ohio State on their heels once again, they'll have a great chance of winning this game. Looking at the middle of the defense, these guys aren't all that great in coverage, these linebackers, but since Keenan Philly went down, they have not really been that bad. Haven't really missed much of a beat. Jalen Smith's been a very efficient tackler. Jeremiah Tellander, he's been a good run defender. Arian Carter, bit of a versatile guy. He's had his own struggles, but he's the best linebacker here in what is a youthful group against these great backs. When you have such a great D-line in front of you, though, it's really easy to operate, of course. But if they're held in check by some miracle against this, abysmal offensive line, these guys will be in for, potentially a tough afternoon. I think these guys need to be more consistent in terms of run stopping, if that's the case, and coverage is not all that great. And these backs, especially Henderson, can hurt you downfield through the air. Now you move to a secondary led by Jermod McCoy, a phenomenal corner, having an elite year. Alongside him, Ricky Gibson, Jalen McMurray. These guys have been pretty good as well. They've faced some tougher offenses. They have threats that can burn you if you're not on your best. Against Georgia was certainly a tough afternoon. But these are good coverage corners. You can probably leave them in man, and they'll probably be pretty, stout on some plays. Of course, not all of them against this great receiving group. Zone could certainly be more deadly with the quarterback's abilities, and these pass catchers are going to make tough plays in traffic. Young guy in Boo Carter has not been that great in coverage, but he's a good, run defender. He's a nice, efficient tackler as well. These guys probably going to be targeted a lot, though, and I like the safeties here. Will Brooks, he's a good player. He's been very consistent, great against the run. He's been a good coverage asset. Andre Turrentine, on the other hand, has been the far opposite. He's been missing a lot of tackles, hasn't been that good in coverage. Jacoby Thomas, whenever he's on the field, seems to bring a more efficient, productivity to his realm for this defense. I think this is a good secondary, though. They've only allowed one play this year, 40-plus yards. That's tied for first in college football. It's not a bad secondary. They've played good all year long. Are they going to play good in this game? I think they'll be decent. I don't know if they'll be great. The Georgia game certainly was a team effort in terms of why they struggled, because the D-line was unable to really do anything, and Beck was really, on a heater that day. Other than that, though, they've not had too many issues. Stopping the pass against Arkansas was a little shaky. Couldn't get off the field in that one. Other than that, though, these guys have been splendid. 57% comp rate allowed, 11 interceptions to 9 touchdowns. Got to be happy with this secondary going into this matchup. Now we move to an Ohio State defense. So they had to do a lot against Michigan. Their offense really put them in a lot of bad positions. The best way to describe that is they missed a tackle on third down against Quill Mullings. He put them in scoring position, and that pretty much caused them to lose the game. I mean, that's how bad the offense was. They missed one tackle, and you lose the whole game. That's how flawless the defense had been throughout the afternoon. Against the run, though, they've been stout. That 172 they gave up to Michigan on 42 attempts, by far the most they've given up all year. Had some issues on the left side against Oregon, stopping the run. Other than that, nobody was been able to crack them. I think Indiana did a pretty good job running the ball, but the sack yardage really brought that down. Really, had their way with that offensive line. I can't really think of too many opportunities, though, here where they've really just been gashed against the run, because they haven't. They typically play a very stout group, a stout game for 4 quarters against the run. Of course, they have veterans up front. Jack Sawyer, JT Tumalau. Seems like these guys need to step up more. They're kind of quiet at times. The consistency level from those players just seems to be a little bit too low. I know they're great against the run, and they're still very impactful on every down they play. Want to hear those names called a little bit more, though, in terms of better pass rush productivity, because they certainly have not brought a lot of that to the table. 6 for JT, and then Sawyer has 4.5. Those numbers should honestly be a lot more. And I think in this game, you're going to see opportunities for sacks against these tackles. Look on the interior, though, Tyleik Williams, Ty Hamilton, 2 great interior players. These guys are both seniors against the run, especially Williams. Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry, Caden McDonald. These guys will get on the field, pretty respectable rotational pieces. I think it's all going to be about the starters in this game, though. This defense typically isn't on the field for too many plays per game. They're pretty good at getting off the field. This is a third down defense that is 33%. Pretty exceptional there. But the longer they're on the field, the certainly tougher it can be, because you're going to have to start getting these guys off the field to get those pass rushers, that is, off the field for the younger cats. And, the depth is good, but it's not great. Not too many X factors there. Middle of the defense has been impressive. Cody Simon having an elite year. He's a good pass rusher. He's been great as a run defender. He's been pretty stable in coverage as well. Sonny Styles, making that conversion down the linebacker this year. He's been inconsistent, but he's been, much better in terms of his abilities against the run. His tackling, especially in open field, can be an issue with his size. And, of course, the elite safety, Caleb Downs, who'll get in the box a lot. Arvell Reese, he'll be a linebacker for them, the third-string linebacker. He'll get on the field a good bit. Pretty solid player there as well. This is a linebacker group that's playing phenomenal this year. They've not really been put in too many bad situations. I think they're going to have to be good in coverage in this game, though, because this game's certainly tough to attack. And, you don't want to get burned by checkdowns. Sampson can make you miss. So being, stout and tackling in the middle of the field will be important. Now you move to the secondary. Of course, Denzel Burke. This is a veteran who had issues against Oregon. Hasn't had the greatest of years, but he's been a very efficient tackle. Only 2 missed this year. Davis Enigbason on the other side also has only missed 2 tackles. He's having a great year in coverage, only giving up about 51% comp rate. Burke, on the other hand, he's giving up, a lot of receptions when he's targeted. Not forced many incompletions. These are 2 corners. They'll have to be disciplined in this game. They're getting burned in man coverage, specifically Burke against the Ducks. Thornton here, this is a guy with a lot of speed. Being left on islands is certainly something that's going to happen. Igbason had a great game against Penn State, though. These are good corners at the end of the day. The consistency, it's kind of something we preach in here, because, mentally, when bad plays start to happen, they don't seem to recover. And certainly there's going to be some tough plays in this game that aren't going to be favorable towards you. You got to be staying focused. And whatnot. And Jeremiah Matthews, he'll be the number 3 corner. Pretty good player there. He's got some nice ball skills. Jordan Hancock in the slot, been very impressed with his coverage ability. He's been a surefire player for them. Lorenzo Styles. He's getting on the field, but probably won't in this matchup. He's not been very good this year. The converted wide receiver, but he's going to be the number 2 guy in the slot, I guess. Probably be him or Caleb Downs. I would imagine Downs will play more slot than Styles will. Latham Ransom having an elite year. Him and Downs, these guys are phenomenal. Both great at diagnosing plays, against the run and in coverage. They're hard to fool. Tennessee, they're going to put some wrinkles to try and get these guys to bite. I just don't think it's going to happen. These safeties are a surefire that comes. Best duo in the country by far. This is Ohio State defense. Again, they've been great. The game against Oregon, maybe you can kind of put that on them. Maybe Leo's just one guy. Want to see the pass rush start to come alive a little bit more and continue to be dominant against the run. This is going to be one of the tougher attacks you've faced all year. Shouldn't phase you too much, though, as they've been pretty rock solid all year long. Moving to the tail of the tape, team comparisons. I think Ohio State has the edge everywhere but offensive line. That's just probably going to be an issue for them that continues. Obviously, with a couple weeks off, you can really probably pencil in your best guys. They'll be more healthy, though, so they'll be up for a physical affair against a great D-line. Everywhere else, though, the night and day, they're better, and that's going to be the case if anybody they play. They just got to be in the right mental state, and that leads us to our final thoughts in the prediction. For Tennessee, Nico has to man up in this environment. He's got to be efficient. He's got to be accurate, make tough throws against this defense. The D-line needs to showcase how dominant they can be. It seems like a very favorable matchup for them. But the game against Georgia seemed like it'd be favorable too, and they did pretty much nothing. For Ohio State, again, I just keep preaching it. These guys got to believe that they are the best. Got to be physical up front at the same time, though, and I think that's where Ohio State's struggles really are right now. And can Ryan Day put them in that correct state, considering they don't win big games anymore? Penn State doesn't count, of course. They just don't win these type of games, it seems like, and that's why this line kind of seems lofty, at 7.5. I think I'm going to stick with the Buckeyes, because a couple years ago when they played Michigan and lost, they got blown out at home due to some big fourth-quarter touchdowns by Michigan. They turned around a couple weeks later, played Georgia. I picked them to beat Georgia. I thought they would be on point, and they were even better than I thought they would be. I thought the quarterback and the receivers would torch the Bulldogs, and they did. Should have won the game, but figures they blew it here against Tennessee. I think the same thing's going to happen. This is an Ohio State team that's going to come out firing. They're going to be in a much